Managing diabetes effectively really comes down to making some careful dietary choices. And while we often hear that vegetables are super healthy, it might surprise you to learn that some can actually have a pretty big impact on blood sugar levels. That's why understanding which ones require a more mindful approach is so crucial for maintaining stable glucose and your overall well-being. So, in this guide, we're going to shine a light on these specific vegetables. Top 5 dangerous vegetables that worsen diabetes and blood sugar. Now, when you have diabetes, navigating your vegetable choices can sometimes feel like a pretty complex task. But trust me, it doesn't have to be. It's true that a diet rich in vegetables is undeniably beneficial, but it's also important to remember that not all veggies are created equal, especially when we're talking about their impact on blood sugar. You see, certain vegetables, because of their higher carbohydrate and starch content, can actually cause significant spikes in your glucose levels. This is particularly true if you eat them in large quantities or without some proper meal planning. Gaining a deeper understanding of these specific vegetables is really going to empower you to make more informed decisions. This way, you can ensure your plate supports your health goals rather than inadvertently working against them. So let's dive in and explore 5 common vegetables that, while they do offer nutritional value, definitely warrant careful consideration if you're managing diabetes or prediabetes. By learning about their properties and how they affect your body, you'll be much better equipped to integrate them into a balanced, blood sugar-friendly diet. 1. Potatoes, white and sweet. First up, we have potatoes, both white and sweet. Potatoes are such a beloved staple in so many cuisines around the world, aren't they? But they often present a real challenge for individuals managing diabetes. Whether you prefer white or sweet, potatoes are primarily made up of carbohydrates, specifically starch. And what happens is, your body rapidly converts this starch into glucose. This conversion can then lead to a swift and pretty significant rise in your blood sugar levels. This is especially the case if potatoes are eaten in large portions or if they're prepared in ways that increase their glycemic impact. Think frying or mashing with added fats. Now, you might have heard that sweet potatoes are a healthier alternative. It's true they have higher fiber content and a lower glycemic index, or GI, compared to some white potato varieties. However, they are still very carb-dense. In fact, a medium-sized baked sweet potato can contain a substantial amount of carbohydrates, quite comparable to its white counterpart. And it's not just the type of potato. The preparation method also plays a really crucial role. Generally speaking, boiled or steamed potatoes have a slightly lower GI than baked or fried ones. Take French fries or potato chips, for example. They don't just cause a sharp blood sugar spike, they also add unhealthy fats to your diet, which is something else to consider. Now, for those with diabetes, this doesn't necessarily mean you have to completely eliminate potatoes from your life. But, and this is a big but, strict portion control is absolutely paramount. It's helpful to treat potatoes more as a carbohydrate serving rather than a free vegetable. And if you pair them with ample protein and non-starchy vegetables, that can really help mitigate their impact. A great tip is to monitor your blood sugar after consuming potatoes. This will give you some valuable personal feedback on how your own body uniquely responds. 2. Corn. Next on our list is corn. Corn, especially the sweet kind, is another vegetable that can be surprisingly problematic for blood sugar control. That appealing sweetness it has? Well, it comes from a combination of natural sugars and starch, and both of these contribute to its carbohydrate load. So, when you eat corn, whether it's on the cob, as kernels, or even in products like corn tortillas or polenta, your digestive system breaks down these carbohydrates into glucose. This glucose then enters your bloodstream. For someone with diabetes whose body either doesn't produce enough insulin or can't use insulin effectively, this sudden influx of glucose can be quite difficult to manage, often leading to those unwanted elevated blood sugar readings. To give you an idea, a single medium ear of corn can contain around 15 to 20 grams of carbohydrates. That's a pretty significant amount that really needs to be accounted for in a diabetes meal plan. And while it's true that corn does offer some fiber, B vitamins, and minerals, its impact on blood glucose can sometimes outweigh these benefits if you're not consuming it thoughtfully. It's also worth noting that canned or frozen corn can be just as impactful as fresh corn. And when it comes to processed corn products, like corn syrup or cornstarch, well, those are even more concentrated sources of carbohydrates and should definitely be approached with extreme caution or perhaps even avoided altogether. So, if you do choose to include corn in your diet, remember that portion size is absolutely key. Think about having a small serving, maybe half an ear or a quarter cup of kernels, and always try to balance it with protein and healthy fats to help slow down that glucose absorption. 3. Peas. All right, moving on to number 3. Peas. Green peas are often considered a healthy and versatile addition to our meals, and they are in many ways. But they also fall into the category of starchy vegetables that can significantly affect your blood sugar levels if you're not managing them carefully. While it's true they're a good source of vitamins, minerals, and even some plant-based protein and fiber, their carbohydrate content is notably higher than that of many other green vegetables, like broccoli or spinach, for instance. These carbohydrates are primarily in the form of starches and natural sugars. And just like with the other veggies we've discussed, upon digestion, these convert into glucose and can cause a noticeable rise in blood sugar. To put it in perspective, a half-cup serving of cooked green peas can contain approximately 10 to 15 grams of carbohydrates, which definitely needs to be factored into your daily carbohydrate allowance. And just like with other vegetables, the form in which you consume peas also matters. Canned peas, for example, might sometimes have added sugars or sodium, which can further complicate your blood sugar management. So generally, frozen or fresh peas are better choices, but it's important to remember that the carbohydrate content remains. For those of you who are diligently tracking your carbohydrate intake to manage diabetes, underestimating the impact of peas can unfortunately lead to unexpected blood sugar spikes. Now, this doesn't mean they need to be completely avoided, but moderation is really essential here. A good approach is to use peas as a smaller component of a meal, rather than a primary vegetable side dish. And, as always, pairing them with lean proteins and non-starchy vegetables can help buffer their effect on your glucose levels. So, always remember to consider the total carbohydrate count of your meal when you're including peas. 4. Carrots. Number 4 on our list might surprise some of you. Carrots. We all know carrots are widely recognized for their rich beta-carotene content, their fiber, and various vitamins, and they're often promoted for eye health and general wellness, and that's all true. However, for individuals with diabetes, carrots also bring a notable amount of natural sugars and carbohydrates to the table. These can influence blood sugar levels, especially if you're consuming them in larger quantities or in certain forms. Now, it's interesting because raw carrots actually have a relatively low glycemic index, or GI, thanks to their fiber, which helps slow down sugar absorption. But cooked carrots tend to have a higher GI. You see, the cooking process breaks down the cellular structure, and this makes the sugars more readily available for digestion and absorption, potentially leading to a quicker rise in your blood glucose. Just to give you some numbers, a medium-sized carrot contains about 6 grams of carbohydrates, and around half of that is sugar. Now, while this might not seem like a huge amount in isolation, it can definitely add up if you're consuming several carrots or large portions of cooked carrots like you might find in stews, soups, or as a glazed side dish. And here's something really important. Juicing carrots concentrates these sugars significantly, and it removes most of that beneficial fiber. This makes carrot juice a beverage that can cause a really rapid spike in your blood sugar. Therefore, while carrots certainly offer nutritional benefits, if you're managing diabetes, it's wise to be mindful of portion sizes, particularly with cooked carrots. A good strategy is enjoying them raw in moderation or incorporating smaller amounts into mixed dishes that also have plenty of fiber and protein. That's generally a more blood sugar-friendly approach. 5. Parsnips. And finally, at number 5, we have parsnips. Parsnips are root vegetables, and they're closely related to carrots and parsley. They have this lovely, sweet, earthy flavor that actually becomes even more pronounced when they're cooked. Now, while they do offer a good source of fiber, vitamin C, folate, and potassium, it's important to know that parsnips are also quite high in carbohydrates and natural sugars. This makes them a vegetable that individuals with diabetes really need to approach with caution. When you compare them to many non-starchy vegetables, parsnips have a more significant potential to elevate your blood sugar levels. Just to illustrate, a 1-cup serving of cooked parsnips can contain over 20 grams of carbohydrates. That's a substantial amount that can easily impact your glucose control if it's not carefully accounted for in your meal plan. In terms of their carbohydrate profile, it's quite similar to that of potatoes. This means they're digested and converted into glucose relatively quickly. And common preparation methods like roasting or mashing parsnips can actually further increase their glycemic impact, especially if you're adding fats or additional sugars during cooking. So, for someone managing diabetes, particularly if you're sensitive to carbohydrates, consuming a large serving of parsnips could definitely lead to an undesirable spike in blood sugar. If you do enjoy parsnips, and many people do, it's absolutely crucial to practice strict portion control. Think of them as a primary carbohydrate source in your meal, rather than a low-impact vegetable. And just like with the others, pairing them with lean protein and plenty of non-starchy, high-fiber vegetables can help to moderate their effect on your blood glucose levels. As always, monitoring your individual response after eating parsnips is also a really good idea. Why these vegetables can be problematic for blood sugar. So you might be wondering, why exactly can these vegetables be problematic for blood sugar? Well, the primary reason that certain vegetables, like the potatoes, corn, peas, carrots, and parsnips we've just talked about, can be tricky for blood sugar management really comes down to their carbohydrate composition. You see, all carbohydrates, whether they come from sugars or starches, are broken down by your body into glucose. Glucose is the main sugar found in your blood, and it's the body's primary source of energy. Now, for individuals with diabetes, the body's ability to process this glucose is impaired. And what this means is that foods high in carbohydrates can lead to a more significant and rapid increase in blood glucose levels. These particular vegetables we've highlighted are often referred to as starchy vegetables, although carrots are sometimes considered borderline. This is because a large portion of their carbohydrate content comes from starch. Generally, starchy foods tend to have a higher impact on blood sugar than non-starchy vegetables. Think about leafy greens, broccoli, or bell peppers. These are much lower in carbohydrates and higher in fiber. And fiber plays such a crucial role because it slows down the digestion and absorption of sugar. This leads to a much more gradual rise in blood glucose. So, while the problematic vegetables we've discussed do indeed contain fiber and valuable nutrients, their higher starch and/or natural sugar content means they contribute more readily to blood glucose elevation. This is especially true if they're consumed in larger portions or without balancing them properly with other food groups. Glycemic index versus carbohydrate content. What matters most? Now let's talk a bit about the glycemic index versus carbohydrate content and what really matters most. When you're managing diabetes, you'll often hear terms like the glycemic index, or GI, and glycemic load, or GL. These are measures of how a carbohydrate-containing food raises your blood glucose. And while the GI can be a useful tool, it indicates how quickly a food might spike your sugar. It's often the total carbohydrate content of a food that plays a more critical and practical role in your day-to-day blood sugar management. Why is that? Well, it's because portion size, which directly relates to your total carbohydrate intake, is a major determinant of the overall glucose response. Think about it this way. A food might have a low GI, but if you eat a really large quantity of it, you're still going to consume a lot of carbohydrates, and that will lead to a significant blood sugar rise. On the flip side, A high GI food that's consumed in a very small portion might actually have a lesser impact. So for most people with diabetes, focusing primarily on counting or simply being aware of the total grams of carbohydrates in your meals usually provides a more straightforward and effective strategy. Of course, understanding both GI and total carbs can be beneficial, but at the end of the day, consistent carbohydrate management through portion control is absolutely fundamental. So, to wrap things up, while there's no doubt that vegetables are absolutely vital for our health, understanding that some of them, like the potatoes, corn, peas, carrots, and parsnips we've discussed, do carry a higher carbohydrate load is really key when it comes to diabetes management. Remember, it's not about total avoidance. Instead, it's all about making informed choices, practicing good portion control, and creating balanced meals. These are the strategies that will truly help you maintain stable blood sugar levels. If you found this information helpful, we'd be so grateful if you'd share this video with others who might benefit from it. And we genuinely love to hear your thoughts or any questions you might have, so please do leave them in the comments section below.